Forever Skies is a survival game set on a destroyed Earth. The surface world is covered in a toxic cloud. You return to Earth after hundreds of years to find a cure. To do this, you will have to traverse the sky in an expendable airship, finding rooftops and other tall buildings that are not encased by this cloud. Scavenge for food and materials to eventually make your plunge down into the dust to find a cure to save humanity. They decided to delay the game a couple of months. This would allow the dev team to patch up bugs that come up during the open demo of the game, and add content at launch that was initially planned to release later as an update, like exploring under the dust, a feature that many fans were looking forward to. After months of waiting, we are finally able to play the game. Forever Skies has many mechanics to learn, from how to cure different viruses you get from eating, to how to unlock new research to upgrade your airship. The tutorial zone slowly leads you into the main story of the game. Humanity fled planet Earth hundreds of years ago due to an ecological disaster. However, people on the space station got ill, and the cure could be found somewhere on Earth. Getting it will be your job. So you head back to Earth, where you crash land on one of the lower parts of a skyscraper. This is where the game begins. You have to make your way to the top and fix a very conveniently placed half-built airship. After you get the airship into the sky, the quests switch over from complete this task to go towards this location, making for a smooth transition between the tutorial and the rest of the game. For what is clearly meant to be the tutorial, Forever Skies luckily throws out the basic which people should already know, like how to walk or jump, and only teaches you useful things. During the tutorial, you already get a sneak peek of the virus system. When eating raw vegetables, meat, or when you get attacked by enemies, you risk the chance of getting infected with a virus. Depending on what you eat or what attacked you, the side effects are different. Some are harder to deal with than others. For example, at the start of the game, you get told to eat a sun melon. This gives the player the photophobia virus, and what it does is hurt the player when they look directly into the sun. After a few more quests, you're being taught how to cure yourself. The method is simple. You fish up a dusk moth, and after eating it, you're cured. While I find this in and of itself a missed opportunity to make an in-depth medical system, where you have to research an antidote, there is something to scratch that itch. After going below the dust and reaching the surface for the first time, you unlock a virus sample analyzer. Here's where you take the item that infects you, like the sun melon, and take its DNA apart in a minigame that takes the pure version of the virus. With this pure virus, you can make boosters like the hypothermia booster. This is what makes Forever Skies unique, and once you learn how the minigame works, it's a lot of fun. I hope to expand on this during the early access stage. There's a vast amount of items the player needs to collect for crafting. Most of these can be found at the different outposts scattered around the planet. While machine parts or electrical components can be picked up by hand, other materials require a DAC extractor. This is a large machine that you can place on your airship that shoots a beam to break larger materials down for use. This is mainly used to collect metal and synthetics, with copper and more later in the game. These resources are used in a lot of crafting, but luckily clusters of metal and synthetics float around in the sky. This gives you something to do when you put your airship on autopilot towards your next destination. The way the materials spawn in seems similar to Raft. They come from one direction. Unlike Raft, however, the speed of the wind determines how many and how fast resources spawn in. Later on in the game, you find a blueprint for an automatic collector, which makes getting metal and synthetics a breeze. For items like glass and copper, the DAC extractor can be really annoying to use, as you need to rotate the ship and hover it in the correct location to harvest them, and most of the time they will be obstructed by walls and the sorts. This is where the small carry size extractor comes in. After unlocking this, gathering resources becomes a lot easier as you just walk up to them and break it down on the spot. Forever Skies has a lot of items to craft. You do not have every recipe unlocked from the start, nor when you pick up the item it requires to craft. To unlock new crafting recipes, you either need to find data cards, which are found on points of interest. These mainly give decorative pieces for your base. The other way is to scan broken variants or raw materials with a scanner. Afterward, you still cannot make it until you research it. This mechanic is fine, albeit a bit annoying at times, as it costs resources to research. I would understand if you had to research a recipe that you obtain by scanning raw resources, as you would have to put this idea together and see if it works. But when you scan an already existing machine, you would think the 3D printer you use already has the necessary information to make it. This is just a small gripe, as resources are abundant if you travel to every point of interest you come across along the way. When crafting, you quickly realize you're gonna need a massive airship. Not only are there a lot of machines, there's also multiple chargers for each tier, for example. And not only that, The amount of storage you need is massive. On your journey, you'll find a lot of random components, and the initial storage box size is very small. Luckily, you do unlock larger chests not far into the game, but early it's a real hassle, especially since some items like batteries or plants do not stack, taking up a lot of inventory space. Expanding the airship takes a large amount of both metal and synthetic, depending on if you want to have plastic or metal walls. These materials luckily float around in the sky and can easily be harvested with the deck extractor. However, due to the amount of resources it takes, do not expect to make quick progress on expanding your base early game. After having built an automatic collector or two, expanding is way more relaxing, as you do not have to keep switching between building, collecting, and eating to survive. You can add ladders to add different elevations to your ship, but keep in mind that the larger you make it, the harder it becomes to see where you're flying. Adding extra levels makes it especially hard, and I may or may not have crashed my ship into a radio tower more than once. Decorations are plentiful. New recipes for shelves, lights, tables, etc. can be obtained by picking up data cards on points of interest. At first I was pretty confused on how to make these items. Turns out that you need to find and build a completely different kind of crafting station in order to craft them. In the grand scheme of things, this is not the worst, but since the build tool does not have a lot of uses besides adding rooms to the ship, it would have been nice to be able to use that instead. Painting walls is a feature in Forever Skies as well. There's a lot of different colors and patterns to choose from, so you'll be able to truly make your airship your own. There are also collectibles like posters and other smaller decorations you can find out in the world. Different ones spawn depending on the type of location you visit. These look very nice and don't spawn at every tower, so it's a nice treat to find one. But the Join Project Oxygen poster spawns in way too often. Some other posters take up an entire wall, which is a little much in my opinion, as it makes them really hard to place in a nice looking spot. There are multiple points of interest you can visit in Forever Skies. The most common one is the radio tower. To avoid making them feel too similar, the developers added variations to most points of interest. Some are more overgrown and others have a small village. This is the same for the wind farms and the greenhouses. Depending on which alteration you find, you come across alternate objects to scan, which unlock new crafting recipes. The towers themselves only have a few different designs per variation, so if you discovered a few, you've seen them all. While this is no deal breaker by any means, I do wish they made them a little more distinct, or at least added more variations, as I explored 3 radio towers in a row that were identical. Which how often you see and visit them, especially at the start of your journey, having more unique towers to explore would be really nice. In the current stage of the game, there's 4 different points of interest. The 3 I just mentioned, and the last one being the lift to go below the dust. This POI seems to have the least amount of variation. While all of them are 100% identical, you will have to visit one for the story that has an extra room that is blocked off at the other locations. This makes exploring them pretty boring, as you already know where all the secret loot stashes are hiding. After finding and activating the lift, it is time to go under the dust. This was the part I was really excited about, and it did not disappoint. The surface has an overgrown, post-apocalyptic look and is covered in toxic dust, making you unable to breathe. Unlike the open space high up in the clouds, down here you have to navigate through narrow corridors and tunnels. To help you not get lost, there's arrows on the ground pointing you back to the lift, which is very clever design. There are also oxygen refill stations scattered around, as you cannot breathe the toxic air down here. But you need to power these with special crystal batteries. These crystals can also be found below on the surface and are used to power more important machines. There's a lot of hidden loot stashes you can find by exploring and destroying certain walls or vines. Exploring deeper below the dust, you will encounter hostile enemies. So you don't walk in unprepared. The devs found an excellent way of telling the player they need a weapon. Crossbow bolts can be found sticking out of the walls in a lot of places, signaling that people were once down here fighting something. Personally, I love these small details, as it is very immersive compared to a text window popping up telling you there's enemies in the area. At the game's current state, the fundamentals are rock solid to build on. The experience is pretty short, and you will have seen and done everything in a couple of hours, but there's already a lot of lore scattered around in the world in the form of digital notes for people who want to learn everything they can about this world. There's a lot you can do to customize your ship, and the game looks absolutely stunning, both above the dust and below as well. The sound design is fantastic, especially the thunderstorms, with many big updates planned like 4-player co-op, finishing the story, new locations to explore, threats, and way more. In conclusion, the game has a stunning scenery, a good decoration variety, a great sound design, and some unique research features. However, it has a lack of interesting locations, and viruses are not a threat. All in all, this is definitely a game I would recommend to any survival game fan out there, as it stands all rate Forever Skies a 7 out of 10.